Here to talk about it a little bit further is Texas Congressman Pat Fallon. Congressman Fallon, thank you so much for joining us. Love having you with us.
Heather, thank you very much, and happy Memorial Day to you.
Yes, you too. So what's happening in Florida? Governor Abbott also has taken some stances against big tech there in the great state of Florida. And our former president had something to say about that during an exclusive interview with Newsmax host Steve Cortez. Listen to this.
Florida, Ron, Texas, what they're doing is incredible. They're putting very, very powerful restrictions on big tech. Now, when you add Florida and you add what Greg Abbott's doing in Texas and the others, and a lot of people together, and you look at other states, big states and small states, doesn't matter. You add them all up, they're not going to be able to function unless they become reasonable. So they're basically doing what the federal government will never do. They will never do it. They're taken care of very nicely, the other side, the Democrats.
So, Congressman, is that the answer? Do the states need to take control of this?
You know, Heather, absolutely. And as I was watching that clip, I just missed President Trump. It was great to see him. Let's be very honest. The Silicon Valley oligarchs are only out for really one thing, and that is suppressing and ultimately silencing conservative speech. Let's look at the reasons they gave, particularly Twitter gave and Facebook, to suspending President Trump's accounts. They said he was undermining democracy and was inciting violence. That's what they said. So let's just see who they do allow on their platforms. The Ayatollah Ali Khamenei from Iran, Vladimir Putin from Russia, China's Xi Jinping, Venezuela's Maduro, and Cuba's Diaz-Canel. You're telling me that those countries don't incite violence and suppress the democratic process? It's a joke, and they're absolutely hypocritical.
Yeah, and not only that, we had Congresswoman Kat Cammack on our show this past week on American Agenda, and she brought to our attention, and it's unbelievable, but it's true. I'm telling you, if anyone's listening to this, if you don't believe me, look it up for yourself. On Facebook, there's advertisements for human and drug traffickers, and also places where people can find information into how they can cross over the border illegally and come here to the United States. That's allowed on Facebook.
Well, it's very typical liberal selective outrage, and that's the issue here. And that's why I'm so glad to see states like Florida with Governor DeSantis and my home state here in Texas. Now, Senate Bill 12 hasn't passed yet. I mean, Governor DeSantis signed his bill into law, and it's effective July 1st. Texas the legislature hasn't got it done yet. And I would really respectfully call on Governor Abbott, if they don't get Senate Bill passed and on his desk, that he add it to the call when they do have their special session.
What about folks who have an issue with the government getting more control of private companies? What's the difference? Because, obviously, as Republicans, the push for more and more government into people's lives is never something that Republicans usually go for. What's the difference when you're talking about Twitter or Facebook? Because they are privately held companies.
They're a privately held company, Heather, but they use the internet. And the internet, just like the airwaves, is owned by the American people. The American government, with their vast resources, helped to develop the internet. In fact, without the government, that probably may very well not exist even to this day. So Twitter and Facebook can do whatever they want. But if they use the internet, they shouldn't be able to censor folks that they simply disagree with. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of opinions of folks that are contrary to our own.
So
and that is the American way.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. You can't have the 230 protections if you're going to do what they're doing, which is censoring half the country.
Well, yeah, that's just the point. And it's despicable. And you see it on most liberally run networks, which is on darn near all of them. They don't have equal speech, they don't give equal
time
access to both sides of the equation because, quite frankly, conservatism is based on logic and liberalism is based on emotion.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this. At Twitter's annual shareholder meeting that was this past week, there was a member of the conservative shareholder activist group. It's called Free Enterprise Group. And he confronted the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, with a very blunt question. Listen to this.
Why do you continue to censor only on the conservative side?
We have no bias in any of our policies, in our enforcement, in our machine learning algorithms. If we ever find anything even hinting at that, we look at it immediately and rectify it. If we make any mistakes along the way, we admit to them and correct them.
No bias. If they make mistakes, they admit to them and correct them. Do you believe that Jack Dorsey's being honest there?
Well, again, just we talked about earlier, if he is truly worried about folks undermining democracy and inciting violence, then why are dictators the world over allowed on his platform when President Trump is not? I'd love to ask the CEO of Twitter that question directly, and I'd really be curious to hear his answer.
Yeah, I mean, Congressman Fallon, what can be done about it? And people watching this right now, I'm sure, are agreeing with you. I'm sure some of them themselves. I've been censored. I had an interview with President Trump. It wasn't allowed on Facebook. Things that I say on Twitter, I get shadow banned. Is that what they call it? You're a congressman. What can you do about it?
Well, fortunately, I also served in the Texas State House and Senate and have been working with my good friends and political allies to get Senate Bill 12 passed and onto the governor's desk. That's the best way right now. We are outnumbered in Washington, D.C., in the House and the Senate, and we don't have the White House. There's, quite frankly, very little we can do legislatively, but we can encourage the states, and particularly the large states, to take this act, take the bull by the horns and do exactly what Florida has done. Governor DeSantis has set out a really clear and blazing path, and we will hold, if they're going to censor us, then, and all we're talking about is just the First Amendment rights of every American. If you want to use the internet, then you have to be fair. And right now, the big tech oligarchs aren't.
Yeah, and then they team up against other companies that try to provide a conservative voice and shut them down because we see what happened to Parler and Gab, although I think Parler and Gab are both trying to make a comeback. Congressman Fallon, thank you so much for joining us.
Heather, thanks again, and God bless. Happy Memorial Day.
Yeah, you too.